Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Gessel, and I'm the Director of Public Programs at Museum of the African Diaspora in San Francisco. MoAD is a contemporary art museum, and our exhibitions and programming inspire learning through the global lens of the African diaspora. I want to acknowledge the challenging circumstances that still remain even as our spaces begin to open up and expand. MoAD stands in solidarity with Black Lives Matter in recognizing and condemning white supremacy and the ongoing systemic violence against Black people. We honor and mourn the senseless murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Andre Hill, Dante Wright, and Ma'Khia Bryant. We grieve for so many others who have lost their lives at the hands of state-sanctioned violence, including those whose names we do not know. We want to acknowledge that MoAD's commitment to racial justice is ongoing, and as such, we will continue to say their names to hold space and honor these victims. As many of us are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this continent, our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of indigenous peoples on whose land we are located. With deep respect, MoAD acknowledges that even in virtual space, we reside on unceded native lands and thank the Ramaytush and Chochenyo Ohlone peoples of the Bay Area who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. I welcome you this evening to the program series African Diaspora Film Club, occurring monthly with Cornelius Moore, who is the co-director of California Newsreel, the 52-year-old social issue nonprofit film distribution and production company. He is also an independent film curator specializing in works from and about the Black world. Modeled after a book club, we expect that you will have already viewed the film when you join us for this discussion. But if you haven't seen the film, please stick around, and you can still view it on pbs.org. I want to thank Black Public Media for co-sponsoring the series and to POV for collaborating on this program with us. Today, we're excited to discuss the documentary The Neutral Ground and thrilled to have joining us for the discussion the director and writer C.J. Hunt. C.J. Hunt is a comedian and filmmaker living in New York City. He's currently a field producer on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. He has also served as a staff writer for A&E's Black and White and a field producer for BET's The Rundown with Robin Thede. Before working in late night, CJ spent 9 years living in New Orleans, where in 2015 he began filming what he thought would be a quick and easy Confederate monument removal. CJ is an alumnus of Firelight Media's Doc Lab and New Orleans Film Festival's Emerging Voices program. He's also a 2020 New America Fellow, a regular host of The Moth, a graduate from Brown University's Africana Studies Department. CJ is endlessly fascinated by race and comedy's ability to say what we can't. We'll start the discussion this evening with Cornelius and CJ, and we encourage everyone to participate by making comments and sharing reactions in the chat and submitting questions through the Q&A box. And finally, please take a moment to type where you're joining us from the chat. We love finding the diaspora in our audience. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to Cornelius and CJ.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Elizabeth, so much for having me.
Welcome, CJ.
Thanks, Cornelius. Hi.
Wonderful. And thank you for being with us and for making your really wonderful and timely films, that's for sure.
Thank you.
One of the things when people say where they are in the chat, I'm curious if they are located someplace where there are Confederate monuments still up, or there's a struggle to get them down. So great.
Yeah, I am calling from calling. Can we call this calling? Yeah, we can call it calling. I am calling from New York City, the ancestral lands of the Lenape, where just blocks from where a Christopher Columbus monument, larger than the Lee Monument, still stands. In a time when we have seen Christopher Columbus monuments come down all across the country since the lynching of George Floyd. In New York, there stands a giant one to one of the biggest perpetrators of genocide against the indigenous people in the country, who the mayor and the governor still defend. We also have a statue to Teddy Roosevelt that the Museum of Natural History said that they would take down last year, and it is still up. So I'm calling from a place not only that has participated in the making of Confederate monuments. But in this moment, while it condemns Confederate symbols nationally, is currently looking away from symbols still to colonizers.
And as you can see from your film, it takes years and years to get things down, and we're in transient places in the right wing South, and here we are talking about New York City, which has a liberal whatever facade.
Yeah, yeah, let's go. Facade works. A liberal brand.
Okay. Well, New York was good to you because you got an award from the Tribeca Film Festival, right? The Albert Maysles new documentary award. So congratulations for that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah. I want to shout out Firelight Media and Jess Kingston, who won that award, and we were lucky enough to just get special mention for being funny about something that is so terrifying and awful. So I feel really privileged for the love that the film has been getting.
And we can talk about the tone at some point. We will during this whole discussion. But as Elizabeth pointed out, you were living in New Orleans and you thought the film was going to be, well, I guess quicker than it actually turned out to be. So
yeah, you sound like my producer. Well, I guess quicker would be the word. You thought it wouldn't take 6 years, maybe?
6 years.
You thought white supremacy was on the decline?
We found that out. But how did the film change because of that, what you originally thought, and then what the actually film came to be?
Yeah, thank you. In a way, the film is about the growth of white supremacy over the course of 5 years. And what you see of that growth when you're looking at statues. But in a way, it's also a story about me trying to figure out how you actually make this film about the absurdities of the Confederacy as those absurdities continue to grow. So I was living in New Orleans, as Elizabeth said, I'd lived there for 9 years. And I moved there as a teacher in 2007, right after college. And I taught for a little while, and I worked at the public defender's office. And while I was sort of trying to figure out what my career was going to be, I was doing more and more comedy. And for me, comedy is like, it's just part of my anger process. It's like I find out something terrible happened in the news, I get really angry, and then I try to write something about it. And in 2015, the thing that I had started writing about was the way that white Americans still hold on to the Confederacy, even despite grand headline-grabbing white supremacist massacres, why they still hang on to these symbols. By the summer of 2015, we had seen a white supremacist gunman who embraced the Confederate flag and took photos with it. We saw him take 9 lives in Charleston. And even after that, people were still on the floor of the House saying, "Oh, the Confederate flag should still fly above the Capitol." So, this film caught me in a really salty period where I was feeling really upset about that sort of gaslighting that was happening. I was writing about Charleston, and then I could see that fight moving to New Orleans. So activists in Take 'Em Down NOLA and some other organizers were marching in the streets. Our white mayor, Mitch Landrieu, saw that and was like, okay, let's take down 4. Let's just take down 4. And that's when we started rolling the camera at that meeting.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for also dissecting the whole arguments about the Confederacy and what these statues represent, and that the arguments about coming from their point of view that the Civil War was not fought about slavery, it's fought about states' rights, and states' rights seems to keep coming up a lot, contemporary times.
Yes.
But it is, from my standpoint, it's very hard to really believe that there are people who believe that. So part of my question to you is, how did you go about where'd you find these people?
You're trying to be delicate. You're like, in what way the rhetorical, where'd you find these people? These people are crazy. Yeah, I mean,
Were you? Did you do it directly? Did you do it intermediary? What do they think of
yeah, I
you?
mean, yeah. We found them directly. You know, the very
Mm,
first people that you see in the film
mm,
are uh, are just at the city council meeting. You know, those
mm,
are New Orleanians. They run the bowling business and a po' boy restaurant, and
mm,
these are not. It became more and more folks from out of town,
mhm,
coming in from California or New Jersey, and but but that initial wave of folks who are grasping onto white supremacy and the Confederacy that you see in the opening, so beautifully scored by Sultana Isham, those folks who are saying wild stuff, those are just people that you know from around town. And I
mhm,
think, we've seen a lot more footage like that now around, don't teach my kids critical race theory, but like,
mm,
these people exist.
mhm,
And some of the other folks in the film, Pierre McGraw, who's featured briefly, he was one of the main plaintiffs suing the city to keep these monuments. And then Thomas Taylor, who we meet, was also part of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, who was a group
mhm,
suing the city.
mhm,
So at that time, that was the plot. That was the story that we were trying to tell. A city has decided to do something via a democratic process. It's gone through 4+ different hearings. We've had a 5-to-1 vote. This is how local politics work. This is how street names get changed. This is how schools, get moved or rezoned. This is just the workings of local politics.
mhm,
And what we thought that story was evolving into at that time was, no sooner had they voted to move these monuments than then they were sued. And then, very quickly after it, the contractor quit under death threats, and what he reported was his car being bombed. So the folks in the film who are saying wild stuff, we are finding because we are like, who are the people who are suing the city to keep these in place?
mhm.
That is who we found.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you about the role of your producer partner, Darcy McKinnon. Tell us about that.
Yeah, her role is saving my life and
Okay.
keeping me safe.
Well, she was
which
helping
I
us stay.
made difficult. I made a little difficult for her.
Yes.
Shout out to Darcy McKinnon. Yeah, but Darcy and I met on the third floor of Samuel J. Green Charter School when I was
Uh,
a reading teacher and she was a social studies teacher. And then, after I had moved out of the classroom, and by 2015, I found her and she was doing a video nonprofit. So she had
mm,
cameras. So I was like, Darcy,
oh,
let's go
okay.
and film this. But throughout, she became the voice in the film that's essentially like, why are we doing this?
Mhm,
Why do you need more time to dig up more receipts about what the Confederacy said? Why do you need to go? She says it so bluntly. Why do you need to go camp out with white people who already told you that slavery wasn't a bad thing? Why do you need to go to Charlottesville? Why do you need to do any of these things? So the film the film was made by her saying, "Don't do that," and me saying, "Here's why I think we need to do this."
I was scared for you when she said in the car, like, you got out in the bushes with these people,
Yeah.
and I would have, I don't know, I wanted you to make the film, but I might have wanted to lock the doors in the car,
Yeah, just stick the boom pole out the window.
get somebody else to do it. What did they
Yeah.
think? What did
Or I
these
go in
folks think?
whiteface. That's always a strategy.
Well,
I
I
go in
wanted to know what
whiteface.
they thought of you. What did they? What did you tell them about who you were?
Okay. Do you mean when you say what did they think of you? Do you mean did they understand that you were black?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. Like when actually I don't know is not right. I think they did not know.
Mhm.
I mean, when I'm speaking, I'm not like, well, my black father says, like I present how I present, and then also Thomas knows that I'm black and Filipino, who
Okay.
gave us access to that space. But my point is, and I think what you picked up on is when they're saying things like the blacks are still on the plantation because they're ruled by the Democratic Party. I think that those men do not understand that they are talking to a black man,
Mhm.
and I think that is a privilege that I ride into these spaces with, of looking just ambiguously brown, of I am very clearly asking about race, and whiteness, and asking them if they've ever considered how Black people think or who their Black friends are. But I think I have a privilege in looking a little ambiguous, that they read me how they want to read me.
Okay. So
And
do
as
you?
far as the
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
please.
No, I was going to ask you, did you have personally in your family people who had a history of enslavement in this country?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
my people are from Mississippi, so everyone in my
Oh
family
yeah.
is from
Okay.
Mississippi until my grandfather and my grandmother, and then they raised their kids, out in California, and were Air Force, and my my dad and his siblings feel like they're from nowhere or feel like they're from everywhere, but everyone else is from Mississippi, from Jackson.
Hmm. Okay. Now I interrupted you. You sound like you were going to say something else.
Oh, I mean, I think I was just gonna say that, and in terms of why we were there,
Hmm.
what we told them was we are trying to understand this divide and trying to understand what folks on both sides of this divide believe.
Hmm. Hmm. Speaking of that, there was a black woman at a rally, and
Yeah.
well, one, I want to find out, was she real?
Cornelius, I picture you just have a list that just says WTF, the reenactment, WTF, the black lady with the Confederate flag. I picture you just moving down this list.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's real. Yeah, she's real. She's real. You've never seen black neo Confederates before?
No.
I ask like I had. Yeah. Oh, you've never seen black neo Confederates? Yes. This is your first experience? Yeah, that's absolutely my first experience too. That's Miss Arlene. There's another guy in that footage who has a big social media following, named Black Rebel. But I think it goes back to your other question about what it felt like for me to be in those spaces.
Hmm.
On the one hand, it absolutely feels dangerous. But on the other hand, it also feels like being a black person at the RNC, or in Republican spaces. They Neo-Confederate spaces celebrate black people in a strange tokenism way, because I think they believe it proves that the Civil War commemoration of the Confederacy is not racist, is not inherently about white supremacy, is not about a lie about white supremacy. That if a black man likes to come and wave a flag and ride a horse, then how could this ever have been racist? So it's a world that really grips onto that tokenism. And even, as early as the 1900s, you saw the United Confederate Veterans bringing out black men who they said were soldiers. And these men were not soldiers. These men were slaves who worked in the camps, who the Confederate Army said out loud, if you put guns in their hands, it's going to ruin them as slaves. But Kevin Levin has this great book right next to my bookshelf, Searching for Black Confederates, just all about the myth. Just like he's just like, hey, this picture who everyone says is a soldier, he was not a soldier. Here are his papers. He was a slave. He cooked stew. So in the archival footage, it's really painful footage looking at black men in the 1900s made to dress up and attend these Confederate reunions and be sort of paraded about, because even then they were invested in writing this myth that somehow the Confederacy was never about race. Even as they were instituting Jim Crow, even as they were lynching people, they were like, look at our black friends.
Whoa.
So that's just continued. That's just
Yeah,
continued.
that's
So
continued.
so you see it in the film. She says, my ancestor, he was a slave, but he loved the South. He loved the Confederacy. He may have dug ditches, but he contributed. And I think that, especially for our conversation, is just a really harrowing picture of erasure. That you can erase someone so completely that they're like, well, at least I helped the oppressors. At least I helped. I dug some ditches. Like that's erasure.
So hopefully she's the only person that you saw. I mean, that you encountered, and because she's in the film because she's
I mean,
representing that.
Cornelius, there's lots of these people. Not tons. Certainly when I was there, I was going, where are all the other black people?
Mm.
Which is, probably their main clue that I was black, but I'm like, do any other black people come to, I'm not going to be picky. I'm not going to be like, where are all the Blasians? Where's the black and Filipinos who come out? I was just like, where are all the other black people? And everyone had a story of, well, there's a guy, he brings a horse, and this guy, he pretends he falls off the horse. So they're telling a story about like, oh, this other guy, he came and he pretends to be the slave of another man, and he gets all you can eat. And they think that this is like a funny story about their black friends, and all of these stories send me right to the sunken place. But yeah, this is a subculture. This is a subculture of neo-Confederism that's like, well, if there's blacks who are into this, it can't be racist. They pay for these people to like travel around the country. It's if you are down on your luck and you are looking for a wild gig that will destroy your soul, that check them out.
No, thanks. Okay.
Yeah.
Another scene that really was scary to me, and probably was scary to Darcy and everybody who cares about you, was you and Abdulaziz in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
And the way that was filmed, could have been like you were really in the middle of it and close to those folks. So say more about that.
Yeah, I mean, we went there for I'm struggling because I don't, so even when different people ask me this, I never know what to say besides like, it was very scary and bad. We went because I thought that it could be the end of the film, that it could be just that most of the film would be the removal saga, and then those monuments came down in May of 2017, and Charlottesville happened in August. So I thought it would be a tiny piece of just like, and look at the momentum moving to another city. Because people forget that those white supremacists were there to intervene on a city council decision to take down the Robert E. Lee Monument. People forget that fight was about statues, that on their initial flyer, they just had silhouettes of statues. So part of me was like, okay, this is just going to be a little, epilogue at the end. And then part of me was also, I think, hungry for the mask to come off. You know what I mean? That like, so much we're dealing with white supremacy when it's wearing a mask, when it's like, I'm just talking about school choice, or, I'm just talking about critical race theory. There's some weird mask that it's wearing. And all throughout, as you see in the movie, being in New Orleans, they're wearing a mask of civility, of this is about preservation, and this is about preserving history, and we should tell a full history, so we should keep these in place. But in Charlottesville, we knew that people going there were like, this is not about history, this is about the white race and how we are being replaced, and these monuments speak to the glory of the white race and how we are superior. So just like I thought it was important to go to that Confederate reenactment to show white supremacy in that space, I thought it was really important to go to Charlottesville to show people being like, yeah, these statues are about white supremacy, and that's why we need them. And I think the thing that sticks with me, besides just like the feeling of physical danger, is that they felt really powerful. We have been in spaces, specifically those of us who were out in the streets in 2020, of what it feels like when your people feel powerful. The feeling of saying like, whose streets? Our streets. And if you can imagine the inverse of that, that's what that felt like. That it felt like they were winning. And in the immediate aftermath, I don't know if that judgment was wrong. So I think that's the thing that sticks with me about. I remember feeling very scared because it felt like those white supremacists were on the ascendancy. It felt like, okay, this is the birth of the new Nazi party, and they're just going to be in the streets. And I don't know if that question is resolved.
Yeah, it is. It's not resolved. But I sent you some information about my mother's hometown in Lawrenceville, Virginia. There was a Confederate soldier statue on Main Street in front of City Hall and the Brunswick County Historical Society. And I haven't been there since, well, for a couple of years because of COVID. And I reached out to a cousin who lives around there and to see if, after the murder of George Floyd and the movement in 2020, if that was still there. And he texted me back, and both of us were surprised to find out that it had been taken down. This is a really little small town, but the upsurge had reached this small town where someone went to the city council and said, a black woman, we should take this down. And from the news reports that I'm getting, there wasn't like a lot of, oh, well, the arguments about, well, this is heritage, this is important, but it's too fast. It came down pretty fast.
Yeah. I hope, and I think that that's the moment that we're in right now. The Southern Poverty Law Center estimates that over 300 Confederate monuments and memorials have been removed since the Charleston Massacre in 2015. 300, right? Mm-hmm. Over half of those have come down since the lynching of George Floyd.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that means that we were able to move more in 1 year than we were able to move in 5. Mm-hmm. So I think that is also why we end with the montage of those monuments coming down, because most of the movie, 50 minutes of this film, are about the fight, how hard people fight to hang on to 4 monuments in New Orleans, moving through the official process. But I think what we saw in the wake of George Floyd's murder is that folks were not about waiting for permission anymore. And I think that the most hopeful thing about that is then you saw cities, all of a sudden they had the political will to move their own monuments. Before they were like, we should really talk about this. But once they saw people would challenge them in public space, they're like, hey, United Daughters of the Confederacy, come get your statue.
That's right.
And I think that, that's kind of a cool model of change, about being like, oh, so you're saying that we don't, it's like you just have to see it once. It's like you saw Bree Newsom up on the flagpole and it's like, wait, we can just do that? We can just climb up on that flagpole and take the flag down if we have some hiking equipment? Okay, and then we saw Silent Sam pulled down, or the monument out that in Durham, Do It Like Durham, they pulled that monument down. And I think once you see these moments of possibility, you're like, dang, so we can just do it like that. Mm-hmm. So I think the country is moving at a different pace now, because they're like, we don't have to go to 4 hearings and 2 years of waiting. We can challenge this in public space, and either we will take it down or the city will take it down.
Well, Charlottesville, isn't that Robert E. Lee statue is down?
That just came down. I believe July 10th, and that's incredible. But that's also 3 years after Heather Heyer was murdered in broad daylight. So I think that there's a whole other story about, one story people want to tell about Charlottesville is about what was most obvious to us. But the lesser told story is how white supremacy is just part of the law and keeps these monuments in place even after we clearly see how dangerous they are.
I want to thank you for including in your documentary a good deal about how Reconstruction has been portrayed, and in movies that still carry a lot of, define how people have been taught about that period. And Birth of a Nation is the most infamous, but also Gone with the Wind. So, and as an educational film distributor, I particularly appreciated that aspect of it, because it's you're covering history and that connection with popular culture.
I think, thank you for seeing that. I think that Reconstruction is the story to tell right now. This moment of uncertainty, where we have, after the Civil War, where the whole country has the mandate to make Black freedom real, and to protect Black citizenship, and to protect Black bodies, and that is what the federal government is supposed to be doing, and that very action makes white supremacy even more virulent, and we're reading in newspapers about black men and women being killed every single day, and the nation eventually abandons this project because they don't have the political will to call insurrectionists, yeah, that story resonates pretty strongly for now. And I also think that, you know, is important for us to put in, because I didn't really learn a ton about Reconstruction. Did you have good teachers on Reconstruction?
No, I don't know.
We got maybe one printout from Eric Foner's Reconstruction. Certainly didn't read Du Bois's Black Reconstruction. Certainly were never taught before college about Birth of a Nation and the lie that the white South and white North built, that somehow these blacks were not ready for self-government. Like we had no tools to understand how white supremacy grew in this country. It was like there was the Civil War, Lincoln freed the slaves, Lincoln got shot. Now fast forward, it's Brown v. Board, and Rosa's too tired to get up on the bus. It's like, and somewhere in between was Jim Crow, right? Like we were taught Jim Crow as some abstraction, as separate but equal, but no sense of, this is what white backlash looks like. The history of America is the history of white backlash to black people getting freedom. This is what it looked like. This is what it destroyed. And so I think for us, that was really important, even if we could just cram it in a couple minutes, to be like, no, this was the possibility. These were the black lawmakers. This was us being beautiful and going to school. These were desegregated schools in New Orleans in the 1870s. And then because we lose it to white supremacy, we have to wait until the 1970s. Like that is what I want folks feeling, that sense of tragedy and also possibility of Reconstruction.
But it was transforming that part of the country and the country in general. And it's revolutionizing, and
it's revolutionizing,
and it's rich, and it's a rich. There still has not been, I can't think of anything, maybe you can, other films that have mined those stories and presented them and made them heroic, and certainly made them clear about what the possibility, as you said.
I think the best art about Reconstruction that is coming, we haven't seen yet. This film came out right as we were in edit, but I love this film, PBS's multi-part Reconstruction film. That was a big model for us, but that felt just as refreshing as you're talking about. We were like, wow, a multi-part series on Reconstruction. I've never seen this. Amend came out after we were here and after we locked our edit, and that has some really good stuff on Reconstruction. But I do think, in terms of like, none of us grew up with good documentaries on or with incredible documentaries that are part of the mainstream on Reconstruction, and certainly not any narrative films. But I think all that stuff is coming because people are realizing, God, we're living that time now. And then also, to your point, it was revolutionary that, since the beginning of time, or since the beginning of America, when white politicians fail poor white people, they sell them this lie about, like, it's black people that are making the country so crappy. It's black people who are coming to take your stuff. And it's like, no, black people give you stuff. Black people, us fighting for freedom has always included poor white people, has always given you the best stuff, has given you health care, like a black man gave y'all health care. And in Reconstruction, people forget that the whole notion of public schools comes from Reconstruction.
Thank you.
Before then, poor whites were screwed. If you wanted to go to school, that's not a universal right. That's not something everyone gets. You had to have the money. But Reconstruction was like, we gotta educate these freed people and get those white kids in these schools too. And y'all undid all of that. And we were trying to remake the nation with a vision that included you. And I think that is also part of the digging up of the receipts to show that Black transformations in this country have always made the country better and have always lifted everyone. And the lie is that it is taking something away from you.
Mm-hmm. So were you tempted at all to include the January 6th whatever people want to call it, the attack on the Capitol in the film?
Mm-hmm. The January 6th free speech rally.
Okay.
The January 6th tour of the Capitol.
Uh,
Yeah, I was tempted.
okay.
You know, it's Darcy who's the one who's like, we don't have money for that, and the film needs to be out right now.
Mhm.
But you know, the whole film has been about what happens when we don't call insurrectionists insurrectionists.
Mhm.
What are the consequences of that? You know, Frederick Douglass was writing in 1870 saying we need to make treason odious.
Mhm.
And we are missing an opportunity because we have failed to make it odious and we have made it even honorable. That these white folks are going to continue to attack the government. He was saying that in 1870. And the film is about how that is true. How that is true in Charleston and how that is true in Charlottesville. And we did not anticipate when we started making this film that that would be true in the US Capitol. But I am happy that it's not in the film because it's kind of like, I like that the film ends and then people can be like, wow, the Capitol makes so much more sense now that I've seen this film. Or that I view this film differently now that I've seen what happened at the Capitol. That like, it sounded like we were making a story up before when we were saying, hey, by the way, right after the Civil War, all these white Confederates said that their insurrectionists were patriots and they rewrote the whole narrative and it was all a big lie. That sounds like a conspiracy theory, but now we all just saw a big lie born in front of us. We saw the president say, these are not traitors, these are patriots. So I think people can understand the film more now that they saw the Capitol riots.
Okay. Thank you for that. But I did not know about the 1811 German coast um, uprising of enslaved people. Why was it important for you to include that?
What did you know? What slave rebellions did you grow up knowing about? I'll start. I grew up knowing about Haiti, and I grew up. I knew about, and we got one reference to Haiti, and then we got a couple of paintings of Harriet Tubman running in a swamp. That's all we got for the notion that enslaved people resisted. What did you grow up with?
I didn't get Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
I think we may have gotten Nat Turner, but I'm not sure. And especially, I think probably not because, as I indicated, my mother's family, both my parents are from Virginia. My mother's where my mother's county was only a couple counties over from where the Nat Turner uprising was. But it wasn't until a few years ago that I thought, oh well, it's that right down the road. How should we go
Yeah,
down there and see?
yeah.
So I can't, and maybe John, what happened with at Harper's Ferry with John
Mm-hmm.
Brown and folks, but that was probably it.
We got so little of John Brown and Nat Turner that I continued to confuse them, like up until college. And if you're an interactive bit, if you're watching this, tell us in the chat, like, what were the examples
Yes.
of enslaved people freeing themselves that you grew up with? This happened for hundreds of thousands of enslaved people, right? Like, you can read Book Time with CJ Hunt. You can read that in Black Reconstruction. He gives the numbers, and you're like, this. He's writing in the Depression, and he's giving the numbers of how many enslaved people are running away and killing their masters and poisoning their masters, and how many of them are joining the Union Army. And his whole concept is, enslaved people turned the tide of the war. We ran away, joined the army, and came back and fought our enslavers. So my point was, in a film about the lies of the Confederacy, we also need to be thinking about the silences. And one of the great silences of the Lost Cause, and still the story that the North tells, is how enslaved people fought for their own freedom from the moment that we were on this land. And the 1811 German Coast Uprising is the biggest slave revolt in American history. 400 to 500 people organizing without ever being detected, and not just running away, but then, marching in the rain to New Orleans, where all their white masters are carousing and drunk, in an attempt to kill those masters and end slavery in Louisiana, and hopefully end it in the country. Imagine if we taught that story to kids.
Mhm.
Imagine how they would be able to conceptualize that, like, those who are our greatest thinkers of freedom are not a bunch of old white men who also owned slaves. That this is a legacy of enslaved people in this country, reminding the country what freedom looks like, and being like, we will end slavery now in 1811. So the idea that the Whitney plantation had a monument to that, and the fact that that monument is both a harrowing picture of what enslavers did to those black people. They cut off their heads and put them on spikes, in front of St. Louis Cathedral in New Orleans. If you've ever been to New Orleans and you're like, ooh, the Andrew Jackson statue, ooh, what a beautiful cathedral. That's where they put these severed heads.
Wow.
And it was important to me to show those heads because it is both a statement of, I think how my dad sees the world, which is, look what those folks did to us and to the ancestors. But it is also a statement of, as Ibrahim Asek says, this was an army. This was a revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And you see them standing like an army. And to be able to show not just the empty space and the negative space of the Confederacy, but what positive space looks like, what it would look like to actually commemorate Black freedom in a way that forces us to reckon and also to remember our power. This was like one of the only examples that I had close to me at the time, so we put it in the film.
Well, I'm glad you did. And I'm
Thanks.
glad you lifted it up for us to talk about. I want to just quickly go back. You asked about when I was taught in school. I wasn't taught anything in school. I think what I remember my mother saying about a relative who lived in the house next door. I mean, it's not next door, it's in the country, but who lived during slavery time. Her act of individual resistance was to be very resentful that she was treated worse than the family's dog. So her act was one day, for people who are dog lovers, you just
Trigger
be
warning for the
warned.
dog. Trigger warning for the dog lovers, but also caveat: these are racist dogs.
Yeah, she took the dog out, I think near the river or something in her pond, and hung the dog up and beat it to death. And was asked, well, what happened to the dog? Massa went out in the bushes, so I don't know where the dog went. So that's my memory of, and that was just in a family story.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I think I don't have family stories like that. Mine are from Jim Crow. But I think that this film, which was supposed to be about the intellectual poverty of white supremacy, the emptiness of the whole ideology. Y'all wrote this down. We're showing you the documents, and every time you say that it was about states' rights, I will remind you of what y'all wrote down. That so much of this movie, at least 50 minutes of this movie, are about the emptiness of white supremacy and the ricketiness of it. And a removal activist who I know in California, he printed a guide that was like, hey everyone, quick tip, most of these monuments are hollow at the bottom.
Okay.
Is right. That's what the film is supposed to be. It's supposed to be reminding you that this is hollow at the bottom, that white supremacy is hollow at the bottom. But what the film I was not ready to think about was how little Black history has gotten to me through my education. And that's a thing that I am still thinking about. Not just about like, hey, what books to read, but like as you're talking about a memory passed down, I'm thinking about how much emptier my family history is in terms of stories from ancestors who were enslaved and stories of resistance and things other than a couple of paintings of Harriet and a couple of passing references to Nat and John.
There's a lot in the chat, and I'm having difficulty kind of maneuvering through it. So, Elizabeth, can you help there with some questions or statements from people about, reactions to what we're talking about?
Yeah, well, just in terms of questions, we have uh, somebody who's here with us who is out of the country and can't watch the film on PBS. And so, do you have any advice for how somebody who's outside the US could get access to the film?
We, I email us. Find our website, theneutralgroundfilm.com, and I will find a way for you to watch it. The
Mhm.
longer answer is we are still looking for an international distributor. So if you're an international distributor and you're watching this, then you can help us answer someone else's question. But I think the amount of monument removals that are happening internationally, we're seeing them in Canada, we're seeing them in Colombia, we're seeing them in the United Kingdom. Um, I am confident that we will be able to show this film to you internationally soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on the website and we'll try to see what we can do.
I think there's somebody here from Uruguay, and I think there is somebody from Colombia um, listening in.
Yeah, Ramon from Colombia just um, wrote, "Good evening, excellent discussion. It would be important to make connections with Black people because today in Colombia, colonial history is also being questioned, knocking down I think statues in different cities."
Shout out to Ramon and everyone in Colombia who is pushing that colonialism fight to the fore. Of I've been looking at that all week of
Mm.
a thing. I started this conversation talking about the Confederacy's treason, right? And that's a thing that we talk about a lot, about these people were traitors. Why are they up if they're traitors? But even that concept is like limited by our own understandings of nationalism, right? That it's like it's taken years to even talk about people who did crimes against the nation. Good Lord, how are we going to talk about people whose crimes built the nation?
Mm.
That like you see a stopping short in America, evidenced by the giant Christopher Columbus monument still up in New York, that like even as liberals are able to talk about the Confederacy, when it comes time to talk about colonizers, they're like, I don't know. So all of the best examples of folks pulling down colonizers are happening in places like Canada and places like Colombia. And the photos that I'm looking at of monuments, to Columbus coming down in Colombia are really incredible. And I think that is what some folks are missing. That a this is not spontaneous venting of frustration. That this is a language. This is trying to force something that the law and the landscape does not recognize. And even as state authorities are like, don't knock monuments down, those who perpetuate violence will be held accountable. The protesters are like, yes, that is what we are also saying.
They weren't. I mean,
Yeah, the protesters are like, we agree, now help us pull this rope.
is the film translated into other languages?
We're working on that. Yeah,
Okay.
the person who asked for I have always been a little short-sighted with the film and thinking about how far it's going to spread and how many folks are interested in it. But even at Tribeca, folks were telling me about what was happening in Colombia, and they were like, "Can you please translate this?" So we are working with PBS on that, and we'll absolutely be working with an international distributor, being like, "Geez,
Okay.
I think this film is going to play can be clarifying or helpful in a lot of
Mhm.
places."
We also have another question from Paul Sokolar. It says, "Can you tell us a little more about your dad? Very compelling character. What was it like to grow up with him, and what does he think of the film?"
Great. Thank you, Paul. Oh, I love the chat. Hey, Frida. Okay, so I was asking Cornelius about this in the beginning. I call my dad a look what they've done to us dad. Um, and what I've realized is that a look what they've done to us dad, who's like, look what they did to the ancestors. Never forget what they did to the ancestors, is not specific to black dads. That I have, as I've been talking about the film and showing the film, I have Jewish friends who are like, I have a look what they've done to us dad. Or, I have immigrant friends who are like, yes, that is also how my dad is too. So if you if you recognize my dad as your dad, holler in the chat. But I think that growing up with him, it's kind of a spoiler alert, but I think a lot of the movie is the ways in which I have become him, or the ways in which my understandings of blackness are rooted in what he gave me, and
Mhm.
the places that makes me strong, and I think the places where that is also limited,
Mhm.
particularly in being able to understand and view blackness outside of what they have done to us. Like uh, that's what I was talking about the Heads Monument, and I think that's why even folks in New Orleans, a lot of folks push back on that monument because they're like, I don't want to see more black violence, but I am thoroughly obsessed with white supremacy, and it has led to some of my best work. It's led to making this film. It's why I'm not listening to Darcy and going off to camp with folks in Confederate, or who are wearing Union clothes but are in Civil War garb and believe slavery was fine. It's why I went to Charlottesville. So growing up with him, he is both my best friend and a mentor, and someone who has helped me be very focused on white supremacy. And now that I'm an adult, I am asking myself as a filmmaker, this is my first film, I'm asking, what else am I able to say that is not grounded in the white lens, that is not about psychology of white folks who refuse to see us as people, and is not about what it would take for them to see us as people, and is not about strategies of legal blockade. So my next project, whatever it will be, I am wondering what it would be like to ground that in love, and to ground that in sort of seeing us rather than in sort of trying to chase down and catch them.
Well, your father did a good job.
Thanks.
And even though I did tell you I thought he was rough on you, because especially when I found out you majored in Africana Studies, right, or graduated in Africana Studies
Yeah,
at
yeah, I
Brown.
majored in
So
it.
yeah, so,
He's the reason I majored in Africana Studies too,
uh,
So it's like, yeah, it's this relationship where it's like, yeah, maybe that stuff is rough or intense, but it's also why I'm interested intellectually in what I am interested in. He's like, these folks are out here pretending that white supremacy is not a thing. It absolutely is a thing. Read this article on Amadou Diallo. Read this, read this article on Abner Louima. Open this book on. I'm not going to show it to you, but it's within arm's reach. In middle school, he gave me a book of. It's called Without Sanctuary, and it's a photographic book about lynchings. So I think, I don't know. I don't want to generalize, but I do think that for him as a black dad who moved his mixed, ambiguous looking son to the white suburbs, I think he felt a pressure to ground that blackness in something, and for us it was history.
your father is an academic,
Yeah,
or yeah,
yeah. My father has been. My father has been writing about this. My father was writing about CRT like decades before these Republicans figured out that that's an election strategy.
okay. He's a legal scholar.
Yeah. I'm being evasive because we purposely do not show his name in the film,
Okay,
because trying to keep white trolls from trying to
okay,
figure out
okay,
what's up.
okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay. Thanks for
yeah.
that.
But that's his area. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, were there more questions, Elizabeth?
There's just
Comments?
there's one more question in the Q&A box. Frida Leeper wants to know, were you afraid to be with those people with guns?
Which ones? I'm sure the answer is yes, but which people with guns? There was the reenactors who have fake guns but real guns in the car. There was, the white supremacists in Charlottesville who absolutely had real guns in the
Oh,
street. And strangely, the police weren't doing anything. We remember, like, those of you who participated in any Black Lives Matter protest, you know that you can't even, like, get a group of 20 people without the police, like, locking you down. But the thing that, if you were in Charlottesville, or if you ever look back at any of that footage, the most horrifying thing, other than the most obvious horrifying thing, is the white supremacists. But the second most horrifying thing is the absolute lack of police presence doing anything about these white supremacists who are beating people in the streets. So I was scared then. And then I was also scared when folks were coming to New Orleans from out of town and standing in the middle of the neutral ground with AR-15s and clips. Like, I think it is a statement about, white privilege that, you know, we can name black folks who have been shot because they have a licensed firearm in the car, and they're like, officer, I have a firearm. And all throughout this movie, you can play a Where's Waldo with the amount of white men with assault rifles in this film. So yes, I was scared and continue to be scared.
So there are lots of comments praising how much people love the film. One says, brilliant film, makes serious points with heartfelt humor.
Thanks.
So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to talk about the humor part. You said that that's how you
Sure.
anger.
And yeah, if you love the film, I have one thing to ask you, which is just, we're on PBS until for free. You know, where you don't have to steal a parent's password to a cable service. We are free and on PBS until August 2nd. So if you like the film, I just want to ask that you share it with 2 people who you think would love it just as much as you. Even better if one of them is a teacher. But yeah, the humor for me is, I mean, it's a couple things. One, it is most naturally, it is just how I deal with anger. You know, it's me being angry and saying, you know, we gotta get these guys, we gotta nail this lie, we gotta show that it's a lie. So part of that is the humor, and then I think part of the other strategy behind it is trying to make a film that feels fun and feels pop and feels accessible and feels like you would be into it if you were an 8th grader. And there aren't a lot of films about the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow and the harrowing things that we refuse to face that are sort of light on their face. And I'm trying to use that lightness to make the film more accessible, so that you're laughing at Alexander Stevens' ashy lips one moment, and then you're hearing what he says in the corner speech the next, that we're, you know, constantly playing this roller coaster of, I'm going to keep you in your seat if you're laughing, so that you can be there to see the hard thing that we choose not to see.
So in addition to the broadcast, you've had some in-person film festival screenings and are having some upcoming as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if people go to the neutralground.com, they'll find out.
Yes. You were setting me up, and I'm just like, okay. Yeah, we're gonna be at the Sidewalk Film Festival in Birmingham. We're gonna be at the True Falls Boondoggle. We're gonna be a lot of places that you can find out about by going to the neutralgroundfilm.com, and we're also on all of the socials at It's Not Neutral. At It's Not Neutral. Also, we just did our first library screening with Princeton with a public library in Princeton, New Jersey. And guys, if you want to do this, if you want to screen this film with an audience digitally or in person at a library, you should hit up PBS, because that's something that they're doing a lot, and it was very sweet and very fun.
That's great. And some of the reactions from the audience folks?
Well, I like
all supportive.
Yeah,
nobody who's like,
you know, I get scared all the, you know, I think when you make stuff, you're like, who's not gonna like it? But it has been more things resonate with folks, that it has been incredibly supportive, and more things resonate with folks that I did not imagine would. So, you know, in a way, it's like a very specific story about being Black and Filipino and thinking about that. It's also about, you know, it is a very nerdy film that is like very specific about documents and another thing about the White League, you know, like very specific like that. But people are really vibing with it, and the things that surprise me are how many people are like, I watched this with my 15-year-old. I watched this with my 12-year-old, and they were transfixed. Or I watched this with my 70-year-old dad. Like, for some reason, parents of my friends, like baby boomer generation, this seems to unlock something for them. And I'm also surprised at how many people are watching this like with their families. I thought maybe this is going to be like my radical friends, black folks who listen to NPR, like those folks watching on a tablet, or just, almost like a homework assignment. But folks are watching this like multiple times with their families. So I did not expect that with a film that is as sort of nakedly about white supremacy and the horror of slavery as this film. But I'm glad that it's resonating for folks in different ways.
Okay. Well, I think we're at the time, and I'm going to offer you the opportunity to say some final thoughts before we bid adieu.
Bid adieu.
Yeah.
À tout à l'heure. I want to thank you, Cornelius. I want to thank you. It's been an honor talking to you, particularly because of how much I know you think about news and I know you think about film, and I've loved this. I want to thank Elizabeth and MoAD and the folks at Black Public Media for even making this space. It's been really nice and really beautiful. I think the last thing I want to say is, I already told you all where you can find us, theneutralgroundfilm.com, at It's Not Neutral on all the platforms. Share it with two friends that would love it as much as you would. Even better if you get to do just one. If that person's a teacher, that counts as two people. And then, the last thing I want to say is just do what you can to support teachers trying to do this work. That we are seeing, this film is about statues and how folks are like, Confederate monuments are only an issue because people refuse to tell the truth about the past. And while Confederate monuments are not on the ascendancy in the country, we absolutely see that idea on the ascendancy. We've seen more than 10 bills, I call them dum-dum laws, but bills to try to force our teachers to teach less history, to not teach about slavery, to not name white supremacy. And that is the assault that is happening to us right now. And while you may not be able to fight a specific lawmaker, you do know a teacher. And you do know a teacher who could use this film or could know about Black Reconstruction or any of the many books that I want to pull into the frame. But that is a way that we fight these folks who do not want to tell the truth about the past of this country. So go support a teacher.
Agreed. Thank you so much, CJ.
Thank you so
much. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. Okay. Good luck with the film. And everybody follow CJ's suggestions, please.
Yeah, go love a teacher. Thank you so much, CJ and Cornelius, for this wonderful conversation and for your film, CJ. I will definitely recommend it to as many people as I can. I also want to thank Black Public Media for co-sponsoring this series with us, and POV for collaborating on this particular program. And just want to remind everyone that we will have another African Diaspora Film Club on Sunday, August 15th, again at 5 p.m. Pacific, and we will be discussing Stateless. It's a film documenting the Dominican Republic's troubled relationship with citizens of Haiti or of Haitian descent, and one woman's grassroots campaign to challenge corruption and advocate for social justice in the DR. We'll be joined by the filmmaker, Michelle Stevenson, and the film will screen on PBS starting tomorrow and will be streaming for the next month. Please take a few minutes to fill out our survey. It's always helpful to get feedback from our audience about what you thought about the program. Donate to MoAD if you can, and stay safe out there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much.